Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. The USC commitment sweatshirt busted back out as Lincoln Riley, the USC Trojans, land their first commitment of the spring transfer portal window, coming from former Florida State defensive back Greedy Vance Jr. And the Florida State fans will be the first to tell you, USC, you guys are getting a phenomenal player in Greedy Vance Jr., who not only brings a lot of versatility, but a lot of experience to this USC secondary room. We have identified Greedy Vance Jr. as one of, in my mind, the best available defensive backs. And you look at this USC secondary, not only the addition of someone like Greedy Vance Jr., but what you saw Saturday afternoon from that USC secondary, you're probably looking at one of the most improved position groups across the country. Dan Lynn, Doug Belk doing a phenomenal job with that unit. And I'll say this, it's going to be night and day, the difference between what you're going to see from this USC secondary compared to 2023. Want to dive into Greedy Vance Jr., talk about what he brings to this USC defense. Before we do, and as always, just want to say thank you to you guys. A massive shout out to the USC fans. Y'all know I have a blast talking this program. The amount of support, the amount of fight-ons that you guys throw in the comments section, that means the world to the boys. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Appreciate you guys more than you know for rocking with the fellas. And without further ado, let's get into Greedy Vance Jr. And I want to start with going back to his 2023 season, where I thought he played some very good football, faced 29 targets last year, only gave up 13 catches, a 44% completion percentage when targeted, only 12% missed tackle rate. That is a very good number for a nickelback. And you take a look at Greedy Vance Jr. on the film, fluid mover, I should say, excuse me. This is a guy that is extremely sticky. He makes those throwing windows extremely small. And if there's one takeaway that we had from that USC secondary Saturday afternoon, is the throwing windows were extremely small for Miller Moss and Jaden Maiava. Like, if you want to complete balls down the field against that USC secondary, you're going to have very good throws and wide receivers making plays, which again is a massive difference from what we saw from USC in 2023, where you saw a lot of big-time throwing windows, a lot of busts and coverages. You look at this USC secondary and you're saying it's not only much more talented, it's better coached, and it's more experienced, right? The Carlos Nicholson, John Humphrey, you add a guy like Greedy Vance Jr., all guys that have played a ton of football during their careers. And a guy like Greedy Vance Jr., I think, can bring a little bit of versatility as well. Florida State, he played a lot of nickelback. That's probably where I like his game the most. But during his time at Louisville, played a lot of boundary cornerback as well. And when you have the depth and talent that USC has, that's only going to help this secondary out. We say this all the time. You can never have enough talent and depth in the back end of that USC secondary. Really fired up about Greedy Vance Jr., really fired up about what this USC secondary can bring. I want to have the conversation of where else USC is going to be going in the transfer portal. And I want to talk about, probably, at least in my mind, the biggest position of need. And we had this conversation a little bit earlier, or I guess a little bit later last week, in terms of, where's USC going to go to enhance this defensive line? I think we've all identified that the biggest need on this USC team heading into 2024, heading into the Big Ten, is depth and size on the defensive line. It doesn't sound like USC is going to make a run at a guy like Dominic Williams, who we were all fired up about. But I'll say this, and a lot of you guys said this in the comments section, Dominic Williams is a very good player. I don't know if we're going to pay him 7 figures to come play 1 year at USC. Let some other teams pay for that. And I think what USC is going to be focused on is developing that depth on that defensive line. We always say it. You look at the top defenses across the country. Yes, they have star talent. USC does too, like Bear Alexander, but Michigan. Or you go back to the Georgia defensive lines. Not only were they extremely talented, but they were extremely deep. And in my mind, if you're trying to build this defensive line, I'd rather pay for 3 solid interior defensive linemen as opposed to one really good one in Dominic Williams. And that's not me saying if Dominic Williams comes to USC, we're going to all be pretty fired up about that. But if you're a USC fan, what you're looking for is depth on the inside of the defensive line. A guy that seems that USC probably has a good shot at, or is Jermaine Lolea, coming from Louisville. We said this, Jermaine Lolea is a guy that, when healthy, is a very good interior defensive lineman at the college football level. He's going into his 6th year of college football. USC is going to get the last visit, which can be good and not so good, right? Deion Hayes was supposed to come to USC. He ends up committing to Colorado. If Jermaine Lolea gets to USC's campus, I think you feel pretty good about Jermaine Lolea and what he and USC's chances at getting somebody like him. But I think USC might be playing a little bit of a patient game. And something that I've been thinking about is, you look at the SEC, they always have the top tier guys on the inside of the defensive line. Now, if some of those guys start hitting the transfer portal, they can't transfer within the SEC conference because of the transfer portal rules. I wonder if Lincoln Riley is being a little bit patient, seeing for some of those names in the SEC to hit the transfer portal, and then they start getting aggressive, getting some of these guys on campus and committed. Coach Henderson doing a phenomenal job on the recruiting trail, not only in the transfer portal, but on the high school class. Yes, it is not frustrating, but you want to see USC start getting active on that defensive line. I do think that USC will be getting active, but I think you're seeing a little bit more of a patient approach for Lincoln Riley, where you recognize this defense, you don't need to get extremely desperate in the portal. You can wait, see what the field looks like, and go start identifying the guys that you want. Jermaine Lolea, certainly a guy that I'm a really big fan of. I think the California connection certainly will help. Another name just to monitor is Keandre Lambert-Smith. And we said for USC, that wide receiver room is extremely good. It's going to be tough sledding to get wide receivers to come in because of how talented that room is, but you do want some experience. You do want some depth. Keandre Lambert-Smith slated to visit USC. This one would be perfect. And I think Keandre Lambert-Smith fits into the USC wide receiver room extremely well, too. You look at Keandre Lambert-Smith, a guy that was very good at Penn State. The production and the numbers don't show it because that Penn State offense kind of stunk out loud. Keandre Lambert-Smith's looking to come to an offense that he's going to be able to show what he's about. There's a reason why he's one of, if not the most coveted wide receiver in the portal. If USC can get him on campus, this is a guy that really fits well in the USC wide receiver room. He can operate in the slot. He can operate in the boundary and is just a separator. That's what he brings to this USC wide receiver room. He's not necessarily the biggest. You have guys like Deuce Robinson and Jacoby Lane. He's not necessarily the fastest. You have guys like Zachariah Branch. I'd probably peg him more as a Mekhi Lemon, a guy that just is a high-level wide receiver that knows how to create separation and work after the catch. I think this would be a very nice addition for USC. Greedy Vance Jr., massive pickup for USC. We'll continue to update you guys, have that conversation of targets that are emerging for USC, but I think y'all got a good one in Greedy Vance Jr. Appreciate y'all rocking with the fellas. Again, if y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel, and we'll talk to y'all later.